In 1996, Oasis had one of the most legendary concerts of all time, with nearly 5% of the entire British population signing up for tickets for their 2 nights in Knebworth. This was easily the peak of their popularity, and Noel Gallagher has often questioned himself. What if he quit the band right after those 2 nights? What would happen if he left music while being at the very top and never looked back in anger? Well, we can never know that for sure, but what we do know is that there's another Manchester band that became famous during the Britpop era. This band also has an incredibly famous song, almost as big as Wonderwall, and they happen to quit right after the release of their biggest album. I am, of course, talking about the Verve. Now, different from Oasis, the Verve also had the biggest song of their career unfairly stolen by the Rolling Stones, which ended up getting 100% of the profits from Bitter Sweet Symphony for more than 20 years. So, without further ado, make sure to subscribe if you're a proper British lad, and let's dive deeper into the show that is the history of the Verve. The Verve formed in 1990 in Wigan, when the founding members of the band, Peter Salisbury, Simon Jones, Nick McCabe, and of course, Richard Ashcroft, met each other at the Winstanley Sixth Form College. The band was originally named just Verve, but later they had to add the in front of their name because they were gonna get sued by an American jazz company, which was also called Verve. From the very beginning, the band was putting all the effort they could into their music, with their band sessions sometimes lasting until the early hours of the morning. The Verve had their first gig at a friend's birthday party on the 15th of August 1990. From then on, the band started doing local gigs in Wigan and slowly started gathering an audience. Ashcroft believed that he was part of the best band in the world from the very first days, and sooner or later, other people were gonna start believing it too. Seeing how they were raised in 80s Manchester, the Verve took a lot of inspiration from working class bands of the time, like the Smiths and the Stone Roses. This, combined with the laddish culture that was surrounding them, and Ashcroft's great confidence on stage, made it so in their later years they were going to be counted in with the rest of the Britpop scene. But the Verve actually started with a psychedelic sound. On the 3rd of July 1993, they performed at the Fulham King's Head in London, and here's where they got signed by Hot Records, the same record company as those guys who fuck pumpkins. The band quickly got the media's attention, with NME, Melody Maker and Select jumping to write amazing reviews for them, with NME saying, "Verve are gigantic, an accident in a chemical factory." And mind you, this was all before they even released anything. Soon, the band got a supporting gig for the Smashing Pumpkins, which at the time seemed like a wonderful opportunity, but they performed at the London Astoria, which in Ashcroft's words was barely open, and they didn't even let the band do any sound checks. So Ashcroft did the only logical thing he could have done and threw the mic around and smashed a vodka bottle on stage while being hammered. This is where the band's alcohol problem started, something that would become a much bigger issue in their future. Anyways, on the 9th of March 1992, the band released their very first single, All in the Mind. The song took a lot of inspiration from The Doors, U2, Echo and the Bunnymen, and of course the shoegaze scene of the time. Later that year, they also released Gravity Grave and She's a Superstar, the latter one peaking at number 66 on the UK charts. By the end of the year, they also released their first EP, simply called Verve. Next year, the band started working on their debut album, and they hired none other than John Leckie, the producer of the Stone Roses debut and The Bends, 2 albums that I've already talked about in this channel. And on the 21st of June 1993, the Verve released their first album, A Storm in Heaven. Along with that, they released Blue and Slide Away. No, not that Slide Away. Just like their work before the first album, the band got some really good reviews by the critics, but the album itself didn't get as much commercial success as they hoped for. There was no need to worry though, because they had a genius plan to get some listeners. They were gonna tour America. Now, some of you might remember what happened with the last 2 Britpop bands that toured America, but for anyone who missed that class, let me refresh your memory. Blur went and toured the States after their first album not doing so well, and they got so depressed and homesick, they completely switched genres and became a Britpop band. And Oasis, on the other side, did a gig on Earth, and also Noel fell in love with a girl in San Francisco and almost quit the band. I know I keep plugging my own videos, but I talk about Britpop a lot on this channel. Check out the Oasis and Blur videos, and check out my Discord server since you're at it. Now, surely the Verve was mature enough to not get into trouble in the US, right? On the 11th of July 1994, the Verve was booked to play in Lollapalooza. Before that night, Pete Salisbury got arrested for trashing a hotel room and causing the hotel $450 in damages. During the concert, Ashcroft got so sick because of the drinking that he got hospitalized for dehydration. All I can remember is lying in the ambulance with a drip sticking in my arm, thinking, shit, I'm in an episode of 911. It was every day of the past 6 years catching up with me. They of course went back to performing the very next day. Ada boys. By this time, the Verve had also started touring with Oasis before they even got famous, causing a long-lasting friendship between the frontmen, and Richard Ashcroft actually supporting them on their comeback tour this year. The two bands also got arrested in Sweden in 1994 for, you guessed it, trashing the hotel and causing them like €1,000 in damages. Also for breaking into a church and stealing the communion wine. The hotel staff is probably traumatized by the McCunions to this day. In 1995, the bands toured together again in France, and Nick McCabe got his finger broken by a security official, which made the band postpone a British tour. 1995 was an eventful year for the band though, because they had their first breakup. On the 20th of June 1995, the band released their second album, A Northern Soul. In my opinion, this album is a solid improvement from their debut and features legendary songs of the band like This Is Music, On Your Own, and History, the latter one reaching number 24 on the charts, the highest the band had ever reached. The album was produced by Owen Morris, the same producer that worked on all three of the 90s Oasis albums. The sudden and immediate success of Definitely Maybe the year before had sort of pushed the band to change their sound, and thankfully it worked. This record had some solid fucking tunes. Also, the title track, A Northern Soul, is dedicated to Noel Gallagher. This was a response to Noel dedicating Cast No Shadow to Richard Ashcroft. Looking back now, that song was like a warning sign for what was gonna happen with the Verve. The band kept going for a couple of months, supporting Oasis, playing Glastonbury, and continuing to make a name for themselves, breaking their chart records with every release, until one day, they decided they've had enough. Richard Ashcroft breaks up the band 3 months after the release of A Northern Soul. Neither him or the rest of the band members didn't say much about this breakup, with Richard just saying that it didn't feel right. I knew that I had to do it earlier on, but I just wouldn't face it. Once you're not happy in anything, there's no point living in it, is there? But my addiction to playing and writing and being in this band was so great that I wouldn't do anything about it. The band didn't perform again for 2 solid years, with Glasgow being their last performance. A lot of the fans thought that this was a permanent end for the Verve, and sort of dubbed History as this great finale to their career. There were a lot of reasons for this breakup, and as the band itself said, it was bound to happen sooner or later. McCabe wasn't happy with the band's sound, seeing how he wanted more energetic guitars instead of these grand ballades. This issue continued on their third album as well. Ashcroft couldn't adapt in time to the sudden fame the band was getting, and his drinking problem kept getting worse. That drinking problem was the reason why the band had so many fucked up incidents during their tours, something that not only did it burn them out, but almost killed them. From whatever perspective you saw the situation, the band was just done for. After that, Ashcroft tried to get the band back together by replacing McCabe with a suit guitarist, Bernard Butler. Butler left the band after a couple of days and then was replaced by Simon Tongue. This new lineup never performed live, except Ashcroft supporting Oasis once in New York. Again, without McCabe, nothing felt right.
When you've played in the same band as 4 musicians over the years, when you're writing a song, you tend to hear the way they play in your head, and now you take one piece of the pie away and it falls flat on its face.
So the band went into silence for 2 years. I mean, they were still working together, but McCabe was nowhere to be seen. During this time, Ashcroft kept writing songs and working on the band's third album, Urban Hymns. The album got inspired by all sorts of genres like Britpop, shoegaze, blues, and hip-hop, believe it or not. Ashcroft wanted to make something that was a celebration of everything music had achieved up to that decade, and he fucking did it. He promised the world greatness, and the songs he had written during this period were amazing, as you'll see. Still, there was one core problem with all of this. McCabe was nowhere to be found. Ashcroft could feel that his presence on the songs was missing, and he just refused to release the album without it being 100% perfect. So he gave up, and after 18 months of silence, he finally called him. The Verve was back. I got to the point where nothing other than the Verve would do for me. The band went through the whole album again and re-recorded a bunch of songs now that their old guitarist was back. Urban Hymns was finally ready to be released to the public. I mean, surely nothing could go wrong now. On the 16th of June 1997, the Verve released the biggest song of their career and one of the most iconic songs in British history, Bitter Sweet Symphony. The song entered the UK charts at number 2, and after being used in a couple commercials, it became the anthem of 1997. The lyrics of the song, as it's common with a lot of the Verve's work, are in a way depressive. It talks about the life of your common man. You're trying to make ends meet, you're a slave to money, then you die. This resonated with a huge chunk of the British population at the time, and frankly it still does to this day. If there was one good thing about Britpop, it was the strong sense of pride in being working class. something that I fear has been lost during these last 2 decades. The song then continues to talk about the inability of a person to change, this being for both himself and his country. The iconic music video of the song portrays exactly that feeling. Ashcroft is walking down the street, bumping into people, and refusing to change his direction. The music video became almost as iconic as the song itself, and now every time I'm walking down the street with a black jacket, I think I'm 90s Richard Ashcroft himself. Not to be confused with 90s Liam Gallagher, which I turn into when I sing Supersonic in the shower. Musically, the song is an amazing wall of noise that just keeps getting more intense as the song goes by. My personal favorite part of the song is near the end, where Ashcroft starts talking about sex and violence, melody and silence. The band sampled an orchestra version of The Last Time by the Rolling Stones, thinking that they could easily clear the sample. They did not. Alan Clean owned the rights to the Stones song, and he started a huge lawsuit against the Verve. This lawsuit ended up with the Verve losing 100% of the rights to the song. They didn't make a single penny. I mean, I get that the sample is a huge part of the song, but getting 100% of the profits from one of the biggest British songs ever is just insane. There's a video on YouTube that shows what the song would sound like without the sample. But Ashcroft refused to change the song. What made Bitter Sweet Symphony such an amazing track was the fact that it was a combination of all these different sounds, and removing the Rolling Stones sample would make the song simply lose its magic. However, in 2019, the Rolling Stones gave back the rights to the Verve, and now they finally own their own song. When asked about this, Ashcroft said, "I never had a personal beef with the Stones. They've always been the greatest rock and roll band in the world." Now, he might have not had any beef with the Stones, but I do. They handed over the rights in 2019. That's 22 fucking years of the Verve not making a dime out of the biggest song of 97. Everyone knew that the claim was unfair. I don't know what took them so long to give back the rights, or why they didn't do the right thing in the first place. I know it's the manager's fault or whatever, but who was gonna say no to Mick Jagger? Anyways, Urban Hymns isn't just Bitter Sweet Symphony, and sometimes people forget that. Right after that song, the band released The Drugs Don't Work, which reached number 1 on the UK charts. The song was inspired by the death of Ashcroft's father, and it's just an amazing song. Some other big hits of the album were Sonnet and Lucky Man, which I've shown that song to literally every person I've met. The album really doesn't have any misses, but some songs I'd like to highlight are Catching the Butterfly, which talks about dreams and it's like really trippy. Space and Time is the perfect song for anyone who has mommy issues. The Rolling People and Come On are some energetic tracks for anyone who's looking for the rock and roll stuff. Liam Gallagher himself does some backing vocals on Come On. And One Day is also like mwah. The success of Bitter Sweet Symphony and the rest of the singles made for the album to reach number 1 on the UK charts, knocking off Oasis with Be Here Now. Bitter Sweet Symphony also reached number 12 on the US charts, which made for the band to gain some audience on the other side of the ocean as well. The song got so big that I even heard it on an Albanian ad. By 1998, the Verve had proved themselves to be the greatest band in the world and won Best British Band and Best British Album. On the 24th of May, they had the most iconic concert of their career, Hayhole and Country Park Aspel, where they played to 33,000 fans. The band had finally reached the top of the world, but as we all know, disaster was about to strike. On the 7th of June, McCabe left the band after having a post-show fight with Ashcroft on Dusseldorf. McCabe ended up breaking his hand and Ashcroft got a sore jaw. This made him leave the band indefinitely and they had to continue the tour without him. After a bunch of lackluster performances, in April of '99, the Verve was finally dismembered. Ashcroft chose to remain silent after the fight, not calling out anyone in the press because he didn't want to burn out people publicly.
I don't want to be responsible for messing up someone, you know? I don't want to be responsible for that. Because the things that went on within the Verve, it was heavy stuff, it was real.
If I had to guess why this whole thing happened, it's probably because they just outgrew each other both musically and in life. They had different priorities. Ashcroft had recently gotten married and all this fame they had gained wasn't easy to handle. This, combined with a shit ton of drugs and alcohol, made for everything to just go to shit. The band remained split up for 9.5 years, with Ashcroft having a semi-successful solo career of his own. This feud couldn't last forever though, because Ashcroft was running out of money. Rolling Stone still had the rights to his biggest song at the end of the day. On the 26th of June 2007, the Verve announced that they were finally back together. They did a world tour, and on the 25th of August 2008, they released their 4th album, Fourth.
Love is pain, love is these blues, I'm singing again.
The album peaked the #1 on the UK charts, and Love Is Noise became one of the biggest songs of the band. In classic Verve fashion, the band broke up again after the release of the album after Jones and McCabe suspecting that Ashcroft only reunited the band to get some attention to his solo career. Another factor for their breakup was again drinking, which McCabe refused to quit. The end. What a nice and wholesome story with no fights whatsoever. McCabe and Ashcroft kissed and lived happily ever after. Make sure to subscribe if you like this video, go listen to Urban Hymns if you somehow haven't already, and watch my other videos about Britpop. People have been asking for a Verve video for months now, and I hope I delivered. Check out Discord and Patreon, bye bye!